All right, so strengthening your school safety ecosystem. You might be wondering, what is the school safety ecosystem? So let me define that. Is our approach to school safety is holistic, robust, and thorough, one where different technologies work in unison to achieve the same goals. One of the main takeaways I want you to have from today is understanding there's not one single solution that's going to solve all your school safety needs. Not just an app on a phone or doing one specific thing. It's going to revolve around having multiple technologies that you're using today in your schools and putting them together to work in unison for a more holistic approach to really be able to cover all your bases. Because when it comes to getting notifications out, as an example, is you can't just get the notification out and ensure that it covers most of the building or most of the school grounds, or even 98%. You've got to cover 100% of your school grounds of getting that notification out. And that's going to require multiple solutions working together in unison, a lot of it being some of your existing technology already in your schools, and how we tie that in, and how that bolsters the policies and procedures that you have today that you've trained everybody on, which is obviously a lot of the stuff that Adam's going to be covering, is how do we marry both those together. That's what's going to give you your overall school safety ecosystem. And we'll show you how we put all that stuff together. And by the way, a lot of the stuff that we do that we'll walk with you through today, not only will it help you for improving school safety, it would probably also help you communicate on a day-to-day basis. So you get a lot of value, hopefully, in the way that we describe it for you, and all of this stuff will make sense. So let's talk about video surveillance. Since we're on that topic, so again, it is part of that ecosystem, right? And again, you might not be using it in the first 30 seconds or a minute of an active shooter event, but you're certainly going to be using your camera system for a lot of other, maybe less severe incidents or events that happen in your school, that these systems become very, very important. So I want to kind of go over a lot of best practices around video surveillance, some of the new things that have come out with that technology. So if you're in the market in the next couple of years looking to upgrade your camera system, we're going to give you some guidelines in terms of what to be looking for, what features are out there, what's on the horizon, and really how to get the most value out of that system. Before I go into some of the features, I thought it'd be important to actually just talk about the difference between on-premise camera systems and cloud-based camera systems, only because in the last few years there's been a lot of influx of a lot of cloud-based solutions out there. And I know we talked to a lot of administrators today that struggle with that. Should we continue with a traditional on-premise video camera system, or should we be putting it into the cloud? Are there good things and bad things? What are the pros and cons? So I wanted to do just a high-level overview of the differences because, again, it's like anything. There is no good solution. There's only trade-offs. So it's important to understand the pros and cons of both types of solutions, and then you can make a more informed decision in terms of what's best for your particular district. Now, when it comes to video surveillance, whether you're on-premise or cloud, either way, you will have cameras that are going to be on-premise at your school. And nowadays, they're going to be IP-based cameras. And those cameras are going to be connected to your internal data network. That's what these lines represent. These are your network switches and all your closets that your IT department is managing. Now, you have to store the footage. So an on-premise system called an NVR. NVR stands for a network video recorder. That's just basically a server that everything on your on-premise system is downloading all that video storage. That's where it gets stored. With a cloud-based system, that storage could be, they don't have an NVR. They don't have a server on site. So it's either stored in the cloud, which means it has to go out to the internet, or there's other solutions like you've probably heard of Ricotta. I'm sure everybody's heard of Ricotta. Right? You probably have a coffee mug with Ricotta's name on it. I guarantee you're probably somewhere in your school. But they actually have a pretty smart way of handling it, the storage. Instead of storing it in the cloud, they actually store all the video on the camera itself. And the benefit to that is if you lose connection to the internet, you still have all your storage there, and you're not pushing all this video data over the internet, which obviously can kill your bandwidth. So it's a pretty smart way of doing that. But either way, you could have an NVR or the cloud-based system in the cloud or in the camera itself. Now, in order to see the footage and be able to see what's going on, really the user interface that you're going to be familiar with is something called a VMS, or a video management software. And an on-premise system, that software is on-site, usually in the NVR. That's where you're going to go there to see what's going on and do all your analytics or whatever. With a cloud-based system, that VMS is actually in the cloud. The benefit to having a VMS in the cloud is it actually makes it easier for people to access it from anywhere, because you can connect it from any browser as opposed to with an on-premise system. So for example, if you want to connect it from home, or if you want to be able to see what's going on in the video from your smart device, or obviously have the police have access, it's actually a lot easier to do it with a cloud-based system because they just go into any browser as long as they have the credentials, and now they can access that footage. If you want to do it with a traditional on-premise system, it's a little bit more cumbersome. You actually have to create a VPN connection, VPN tunnel through the school's internal firewall in order to be able to view that. Is it at the end of the world? No, probably a lot of your schools probably today have this set up. It is a little bit more complicated and complex, but it's not quite as easy as a cloud-based solution. Now, if you do have an on-premise solution, there are workarounds to avoiding the VPN, because I know a lot of schools don't like to have that set up or punch holes in their firewall. For example, there's a solution out there called Cloudflare. There's a few other ones. That's just one particular brand that can actually give you access by bypassing the school's firewall to make it easy to access the VMS and the store footage on an on-premise system. Pretty easy, just like if it was a cloud-based solution. So there are workarounds out there. The big difference, though, between these two systems then is what happens when you lose connection to the internet. Okay? Now, with the traditional on-premise system, it's not a big deal. Now, you might not be able to access that footage from the outside, but you can certainly do it from internally because everything is on-premise. That's not a problem. However, with a cloud-based solution, now you've lost connection to the internet. You don't have connection to that VMS anymore. It makes it difficult now to actually get the footage. Now, if all your footage is being stored in the cloud, well, then you're completely out of luck. If it's stored in the camera, like in the case of Recorded and some of the other solutions out there, you still can access that footage. It's not easy to do, though, unless you have connection to the internet and that VMS. So that kind of gives you the pros and cons. So if you don't have good internet coverage in your schools, a cloud-based solution might not be the best solution for you. But again, on-premise might be, or it depends on either way. So those are the pros and cons between them. And there are other hybrid solutions out there, but I just wanted to give you a general overview of the differences between those two types of solutions if you're in the market of making an upgrade. Now, when it comes to actually installing the cameras, one of the things we oftentimes get asked is, how many cameras do I need? Now, that's actually not a good question. The good question you want to ask is, what am I trying to see? What do I want to see within my school? And that's what's really going to determine how many cameras you actually need. And part of that, what's going to determine is the type of cameras that you're going with. So understanding the right camera for the job. So there's a lot of new types of cameras that have been coming on the market, and it makes a difference. The right camera for the job could mean maybe less cameras and actually giving you what you're trying to look at or really what you want to see.
If you don't have cameras in your schools, you should. And you should have mostly for two reasons. One is obviously, we talk about school safety and security. Someone comes into school with a weapon, they do damage. Law enforcement can bring up the cameras, we can view them, X, Y, and Z. But in reality, what are school districts using their cameras for every single day? Code of conduct issues, for HIV issues. And no need to show of hands, but how many schools open your building after hours for adult volleyball, for Boy Scouts, for X, Y, and Z, you fill in the blank. I can tell you, being a school resource trooper for just shy of 10 years, we didn't have cameras back then, at least not at the beginning. And the amount of cell phones, and they were new back then, we still had the flip phones, the amount of cell phones that were stolen was unmanageable. And it was always, this person took that cell phone. I wish we had cameras back then. We could go back and we could look at it. My school district, we have cameras inside the school buses. We have cameras everywhere. It is a deterrent. It doesn't stop everything, but it's a deterrent. So if you're asking yourself, should you have cameras? Absolutely, you should have cameras. Here's the caveat. How are you going to get those cameras?
And something we would definitely advise that when you're upgrading these systems, have it on the same platform because it's a lot more versatile. So in this particular case, you see Christine's walking through the door here. Your access control system says, yep, it's Christine. We have her credentials from her swipe. But your video cameras is also detecting it's Christine as well. So you have both ways to verifying it's the right person. But another area that becomes important is what we like to call the door ajar solution. And this is the challenge that schools have, is making sure those exterior doors are locked. And you might say, yeah, we lock all our doors. But as Adam talked about before, chances are those doors might be locked, but they're held open with a rock or a stone or with a pen. Somebody in this room used to do that when he was in high school, put a pen in the door and leave during study hall. I'm not going to name who that was, but here's an example of a high school. They have 39 exterior doors. And I've seen a lot of high schools, they got way more exterior doors even than that. And here's a tiny little elementary school, and they got 15 doors. How do you manage all that? So what schools usually do is, all right, we got to send somebody up to be the door monitor and walk around the building. Any of you might have gotten an email or a call from Lenny Rosenberg in our office promoting this event. He actually used to work in a school, and one of the things he was is a school monitor, and he would walk around the building a few times a day to make sure those exterior doors were locked. And what he always found is there's always 1 or 2 doors that were open, and he'd have to close them. But the next time he'd walk around could be a couple of hours later. So you have no idea what's going on in the meantime. So how do you manage to ensure that all those extra doors are locked? And that's where the door jar comes in. So access control, where you have the card swipe and all that, you're only going to, again, have that on a couple of the main doors that you're going to be using on a regular basis. All the other doors that remain locked, what you can do, instead of putting access control on them, is simply put a sensor on all those doors. A sensor that can notify you if any of those doors happen to be open. So if door 17 of this high school happens to be open, you can get an immediate notification that door 17 was just open, and now you can respond immediately to make sure that you secured door 17 instead of waiting for somebody to walk around. Now, when you combine that with video surveillance, it becomes even more powerful. So here's a little video. So here's a map of, a fictitious school here. And here's door. Let's say this is door number 17 in green. Now, green means good. That means the door is secure. And we have a camera here that's monitoring door 17. Now, let's say somebody happens who shouldn't be going through door 17 does so. That door can go from green to red. And there we're getting a pop-up, a video recording of that person who just walked through that door. So not only you notified door 17 was open and it shouldn't be open, and we can go respond to that, now we have a video clip of the person who actually did it. So now we can actually go find that person and maybe make an example of them. But make sure people understand that, yeah, I can't just walk through these doors anymore. There's somebody watching them at all times. So this is, again, how you're leveraging technology to kind of be your eyes and ears, because you can't have people watching this all the time. This is how you can do this. And this becomes a great solution, because if you don't think doors are open in your school building, I guarantee you they are. I see it all the time when I do school safety audits. And obviously, Adam hammered that point home before. But one of the things with Sandy Hook is understanding how these events unfold and the challenges that schools face when there is an active shooter event. There was another group of school safety experts that we had worked with when we were developing some of our technologies. And they actually were a couple of ex-law enforcement, and they went out, they started doing school safety, and they went out to school districts that actually had real-life active shooter events, some of the main ones like Columbine, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, and went to the administration and said, you guys actually had a real active shooter event. How did it go down? What went right and what went wrong, and what can you share with us that we can bring back to other schools? And one of the things they learned is almost all these schools out there had a plan in place until somebody walked into the building with a gun, and a lot of people just responded to what was going on, and there was a lot of chaos because they were just responding to what the event was. They weren't prepared for this. And they said there's a misconception out there. A lot of people are under this impression that a guy walks into school with a gun, school goes into lockdown, everybody hides, the police show up and take the bad guy out, and it's over. They said it never goes down like that. Usually the way it happens is the guy walks in with a gun. There's a lot of chaos because people are just responding. There's usually a delay before the police are even called. Eventually they do get called. Finally they show up and take the bad guy out. And then the school goes into a lockdown, and everybody's trying to pick up the pieces to understand what just happened within our building. And the way they described how these events unfold is if an active shooter walks into the building, 3 zones develop: a hot zone, a warm zone, and a cold zone. So let's say the threat happens to be in this northwest hallway up here. That area is in red, and that's a hot zone. That's basically defined as if you're in the hot zone, you see the threat directly, and you're probably trying to get out for your life. Then you have the warm zone, which is the nearby classes and adjacent hallway. That's in yellow there. And that's basically defined as you don't see the threat directly, but you know there's something going on with the building that's not quite right, but you just, again, don't see that threat. But then you have the vast majority of students and staff are in the cold zone. They have no idea that there's a threat in the building, and their lives are potentially in danger. And how these events unfold is you have the people here in the hot zone, right? They see the threat, and what are they doing? They're trying to get out for their lives. But then you have this person over here in the warm zone. Now, in a perfect scenario, that person would be getting the notification out. However, what ends up happening is human nature kicks in. What do? They decide to go and investigate what's going on. They go from the warm zone into the hot zone. Now they're face to face with the threat. And instead of getting the notification out, they're now running for their lives because their lives are in danger. And what ends up happening is not only the police are not notified, but everybody on school grounds, both inside and outside the building, aren't notified right away. So they don't know to follow any of those procedures. So from their perspective, one of the most important things you can do is getting that emergency notification out as quickly and as effectively as possible so everybody can follow those procedures to get them in a safe enough position long enough until the police do show up and the event is over. So now think I'm the teacher in the classroom now, right? And think about the ways you're doing it right now in your schools. If I'm the teacher, I see a guy with a gun looking out the window, I'm either going to pretend that I'm going to be making an announcement, which I probably won't if I see a guy with a gun, or I'm calling the main office and all those manual aspects have to happen and go right for everything to work properly. However, with an automated solution, that same concept, I'm the teacher, I look out the window and say, oh my gosh, there's a guy with a gun. I just come over the phone, dial on my code, and now I just focus on my students. I'm getting the door locked and closed, getting the kids into a hunker down area, knowing that everybody's going to be notified within seconds. So we have calls going out to the police, PC pop-ups, and everything else will be activated.
Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. This is a lockdown emergency. Please enter into lockdown mode. Move quickly to a secure location and follow our lockdown procedures. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. This is a lockdown emergency. Please enter into lockdown mode. Move quickly to a secure location and follow our lockdown procedures.
And this is an example of what the police would get.
Attention. Lockdown notification. This is the Eastern DataComm lens system reporting that a lockdown has been triggered by high school room 233 from extension 1233, which is on the second floor, back by the football field at 150 Main Street, Hackensack, New Jersey. The school has been placed in lockdown. This message can be repeated.
So forget 20 seconds. I'd say less than 10 seconds. The police have been notified. Everybody in the building has been notified. Everybody outside in the building has been notified. And now they can follow whatever procedures they have in place to get them to a safe enough position long enough until the police do show up and the event is over. The benefit to the stuff that this section I'm going to be talking about right now is all the stuff here that can be done to improve school security and school safety. When you implement it, it actually makes your daily communications that much better. So there's an enormous amount of value of doing these upgrades that we're going to be talking about and showcasing here. Now, the other part of what we want to talk about, the infrastructure, is when the emergency notification section, we talked a lot about active shooter events. But again, there's a lot of other types of emergencies that happen in schools that maybe aren't as severe as an active shooter would be, but are a heck of a lot more common. So things like an evacuation, shelter in place, or hold in place, medical emergencies, angry parent. I was talking about Mr. Jones before. We got to deal with that guy. Weather emergencies, not as big maybe in New Jersey as in some of the other states around the country, but students fighting weapons. So this is where infrastructure becomes critical in order to be able to share that information very, very quickly. One piece I kind of glossed over before was signboards. You saw the first generation signboard, as I like to call it over there, get activated. This is what we like to call our second generation signboard over here. This demo system is actually a closed system. It's not connected to any phone lines or the internet. So this signboard is not connected to it. So this is why I didn't bring it up before. It's actually a cloud-based system. But you can take a look at the picture here so it's a little bit easier to see. Another part of infrastructure is, I mentioned before about the phone system. So having a good working phone system throughout your schools. One thing we do recommend is making sure you have phones in classrooms. I know not every school out there has phones in the classrooms. It is best, I would say, from a technology standpoint, best practice to have phones in classrooms because it's a lot more versatile than a traditional intercom system is where you're pressing a button or flipping a switch to call somebody in the main office. You can use the phone for other types of emergencies as well as activating a lockdown, as we discussed. One thing you should check on your phone systems today when you go back to your districts is every phone system too, not only having phones in the classrooms, you should have a software package called E911 or Emergency 911. That should be part of every phone system that a school district has. What that software does is, if somebody dials 911 from a remote area in the building, you want to notify people within the district that somebody just dialed 911. What I hear commonly happens is they dial 911 from this end of the building, and then first responders show up in this end of the building, go to the main office and say, we're here for the emergency, and the people in the front office say, what emergency? What's going on in the building? So what this software will do is, as soon as you dial 911, key administrators throughout the district are going to get a notification that somebody just dialed 911. And they're going to get notified a few ways: a call to their desk phone, a PC pop-up, might look like something like this. If they're not at the desk, that call can go to their cell phone via a call to the cell phone, an email, or a text message. And not only are they notified that the call's been placed, they're also notified the exact extension and location of where that call came from. So I'll give you an example of what that could look like is, let's say I'm in high school room 233, and there's an emergency, I'm the teacher. I dial 911, that call's going out to the local PSAP, I'm the administrator sitting at my desk, and I'm immediately getting a call, and this is the example of what I could hear.
Attention. This is the Mitel Emergency Notification System calling. A simulated 911 event was generated by High School Room 233 at extension 1233, which is located on the second floor, back by the football field. Press any key to acknowledge this.
So that's an example of Mitel's. Virtually most systems out there should have this software package. So if you don't have this already today, I highly recommend calling your vendor and saying, hey, we need this software package a part of our school system here, because you really want to get that notification out as quickly as possible. The next thing we want to talk about is tying the phone system into the PA system. So the speaker, overhead speaker throughout the building, again, best practice is the phone system is connected to the overhead speakers, so you could go to any classroom and pick up a phone and make an announcement. The reason why that's important is, what if there's an emergency? Say you're the principal and you're in the middle of the school and there's an emergency situation, you want to notify people quickly. What you don't want to have to do is to run from there and run all the way back to the main office to do that. You should be able to go to any nearby classroom, pick up the classroom phone, and then make an announcement over the entire PA system, because you want to make it as quickly and as effectively as possible. And this is something we had done for many years for our school clients. However, as schools have been doing this, one thing we've discovered, and they've discovered as well, is, yeah, that's great using the PA system for these emergency announcements, but what if your PA system has a lot of dead zones throughout, and there's some problematic areas, which is what we find in most schools that we work with. So even though this looks like you got a lot of speaker coverage, this is usually what the speaker coverage looks like in most schools that we work with. You know, I remember the picture in the second section where it should cover the inside and the outside of the building. That's what it should look like. This is usually what reality is. And oftentimes schools are missing speakers in areas like bathrooms is a very common area that are missing speakers. Stairwells is another area. Or every school's got that room that 30 years ago was a closet. Now it was converted to a child study room, but nobody thought to put a speaker in there. So what you want to do is to make sure you have enough coverage throughout the building, so no matter where you are, whether you're in the bathroom, the stairwell, the locker room, when there's an announcement plays, you hear it loud and clear over the speakers, and you can respond accordingly. And not only do we want to cover the inside of the building, you've got to also address the outside of the building as well. We want to make sure we have enough coverage in those inner courtyards and the outside areas like parking lots and ball fields and areas like that. Now, I've been to schools where they've had speakers in the outside of the building and they've deactivated them. And I say, well, why would you deactivate the speakers? And they said, we got neighbors complaining about the morning announcements. We got sick and tired of it, so we deactivate the speakers. I said, well, yeah, but what if there's an emergency? You've got to get that notification out. So there's ways around this, and a smart idea is what we recommend is when you're upgrading your PA system to put the speakers on separate zones. So that's something we do for all our clients because it makes a lot of sense. So for example, the outdoor speakers could be on a separate zone. So now you have good working speakers on the outside of the building, but they're not making day-to-day announcements as they're getting out to the neighbors.
And I will throw this out there too as a best practice. You should be, whenever you're doing, and I've said this I think twice today, but I'll reinforce it. Whenever you do your drills, even though you're calling them drills, if you have a panic button, test the panic button. If you're going to be calling 911, call 911. Clearly let the police department and everyone know ahead of time. They should be part of your drill that month, but how do you know it's going to work unless you test it?
Yeah, a lot of times I get schools ask us, can you put the system in drill mode? Because we don't want the police to be called when we're doing a drill. And the answer is no, there is no drill mode because you should be calling the police, as Adam kind of talked about, making sure that you're getting the proper address. And all of this stuff, should be the tools that you're using to bolster what you're already teaching everybody when it comes to the policies and procedures that you're teaching everybody, you're training on, so everybody knows exactly what to do. So when there's an emergency, you can notify everybody, and hopefully they can do the right thing. Because again, when it comes to school safety, we're all in this together, right, Adam?
Absolutely.